You go?
Well, I just looked up and saw it. I
check the headset and the audio
because I was focusing over there, but yeah, it doesn't really make sense.
All right, all good,
that.
looks good. Twitch chat, tell us we're pretty. How's it going? We are here. We're at the Intrepid Sea Air and Space Museum. I got two amazingly special guests. I mean, we're video gamers, but two amazing planetary scientists have taken time out of their evening to chat about a little project they worked on called New Horizons and the new book they have coming out, Chasing New Horizons. We actually had to grab a copy of the book out of the gift shop because my book that I literally Amazon next dated, and I picked it up and was reading it fervently on the plane on the way out here, but I left the dust jacket at home because it's so pretty. I didn't want to get it ripped up.
Yeah.
So thank y'all so much for joining us. The two people we have with us are Alan Stern on the side, the principal investigator for NASA New Horizons. Is that the right way to say it? What's the official name?
Principal investigator.
Principal investigator for New Horizons. And David Grinspoon. And y'all are co-authors on the book, right?
Yep. That's right. Yep.
So what
Our
does that
names are on
mean?
it, so we ought to be. Yeah.
It's like right there. It's like, good job, guy. You read the book. What does that mean? Like y'all work together on the book, or how does?
From the start.
From the start.
So, Alan, like you said, is the principal investigator of this mission that launched in 2006, made it to the planet Pluto in 2015. But way before launch, there's a long backstory that we tell in the book of
Just show your audience. We know, we know that we explored Pluto because we have bumper stickers.
Yeah, bumper
we
sticker.
have bumper
This is
stickers.
conclusive
bumper
proof.
stickers.
Never mind the picture of Pluto on the book. This is the proof.
Pictures, anybody can manipulate anything in a computer.
Exactly.
This is a physical bumper
The
sticker.
bumper
That's
sticker
right.
is the
Yeah,
legitimate
right, yeah.
proof.
This is it.
Yeah.
And the coolest bumper sticker.
So this shows us the real deal. Well before we actually had a spacecraft ready to launch,
Right.
Alan and this team of, you read the book and you tell me, either crazy or visionary dreamers decided they were
both, like
maybe a little both. They were not going to let go of this idea. They wanted to send a spacecraft to Pluto, and this is the whole story of how that happened from a dream to a reality with this picture on the cover of this amazing planet with this amazing spacecraft photograph. And I am a planetary scientist. I'm not part of the science team for New Horizons, but I'm a huge fan and a friend of the project. And Alan and I worked together to really try to bring out the story, the amazing story of how a spacecraft mission like this happens.
Right.
And by the way, for those of your audience that don't know, in addition to being a planetary scientist, David's also a hell of a musician. And I think the finest book writer who is in the astronomy and space game.
Excellent.
Period.
Hey.
Read Venus Revealed.
I like
read
this guy.
Earth in Human Hands. Look him up.
But that's,
All
I think
of his books are
in the beginning of the book, there's actually other works that you worked on, right? There's like a list or something like that I saw, and I'm like, I need to grab all these things.
Long list.
Yeah, and he's got a few books he's done before too. You know, but this is unlike any book that either of us have ever done before. And I think it's kind of unlike any book really that's ever been written. It's its own species of thing, and I think neither one of us could have written a book by ourselves as good as this, because it kind of combines, you know, Alan's really unique experience on this project,
right,
with the voices of a lot of other people I interviewed and we talked to. So it's not just Alan's story; it's a whole amazing group of people. And then, you know, I worked with him to really kind of weave together this interesting story that's got the history and the technical geeky details and the crazy politics. And then this is the crazy science that we learned at Pluto.
It's the craziest thing, because we love to watch launches for missions or special events, like when the flyby happened, right? So we'll bring up the NASA live streaming, and we'll all sort of get together and we'll talk about it on the show. We love to watch that, but there's years and years and years worth of work before anybody ever turns a bolt on a spacecraft, orders a part or whatever.
Exactly.
And that's where I am in the book right now. I started reading the book on my flight over and just sort of learning all of the sort of, what's the right way to say it, like maneuvering and convincing and building a team of people that not will only come and work on it, but think it's a good idea. It's not like you just show up and people start building a spacecraft, right?
Right. And the book actually starts off 10 days before we get to Pluto, with a near disaster.
With a near disaster.
And the only really bad problem we had in flight, it was at the last minute, and it starts off with a cliffhanger, and then it fades back to 1930. Well, it fades back to my childhood and a little bit of background about me, and then it goes to 1930 when Pluto is discovered by Clyde Tombaugh, and then it starts in the 80s with the building, momentum, and
the underground, I think it was, right?
The Pluto Underground.
Yeah, the
which,
group
you know,
of people.
It sounds like sort of a group of subversives, and it was. I mean, these guys had this idea that was really bucking the establishment, you know, that like, hey, after Voyager's been to Neptune, we've been to all the other planets, nobody's been to Pluto, and these guys were like, hey, let's keep going. And the powers that be at first were like, that doesn't seem likely to happen, kids, you know?
Kids.
And they were like, no, wait a minute, we really want this to happen. And they figured out how to do it, but it took them, you know, more than a decade of really maneuvering and figuring out the system and, you know, rallying support and making a plan that was so good that ultimately NASA and the Congress and, you know, it couldn't be refused. It was such a brilliant design for a spacecraft. It was low cost. It was tiny so that you could accelerate it to Pluto in a huge hurry.
So we're not sitting around forever.
But packed with amazing technology, all the instruments that you need to like really figure out what's going on at Pluto.
Can I just say one thing? Sure. Somebody should make a movie.
No, they should.
I
mean, that scene that Alan described that it starts off with, that's really the Apollo 13 moment. I hate to say it, but like when all of a sudden things were going wrong and people were scrambling and the clock was ticking and like, are we gonna save this thing?
You have to give some context because you're talking about 10 days out of the flyby.
Yeah.
It's not like we launched on Tuesday and then like next Thursday we're flying by Pluto. It was 9 years.
We've been in flight for 3,300 and some odd days.
3,300.
Right? And it happened on July 4th. And so part of the surreal aspect is we had a skeleton crew in, it was a holiday, and then this disaster strikes.
Right.
And of course, we start alerting people. It's sort of like those Amber Alerts.
Right.
The kid is missing.
Yeah, your
like
phone
the whole
starts
phone tree starts buzzing.
Yeah.
And all the flight controllers and the engineers and the mission leadership all get these buzzes on July 4th, middle of the afternoon.
And they're sitting by the pool grilling and drinking their beer.
And people are coming in their flip-flops, and they're coming in their shorts, and they're and they don't know that they're coming in for the long. They thought they're just coming in for a meeting.
Oh, just talk right quick, yeah.
And nobody left for 3 days.
You could almost imagine, like, I would guess, like, the 4th of July was maybe, like, the last hurrah before crunch time, right? Like,
all this stuff.
Oh, that's exactly what it was. It's like give the team a few days off to celebrate the holiday because this is going to be the crunch time, just what you said. But no, it didn't work out that way.
No kidding. So you mentioned, like, early on in the book, it talks about your childhood. And we're on Twitch right now. We play video games. There's lots of younger people and families and stuff like that. But you got a really interesting start with NASA, right? It's not like you were just born into this magical NASA, here's a project. You sort of got started by writing an article, writing a book?
Something like
what
that.
Was it called?
So this is I guess. So I was a teenager, fascinated by space flight.
Right.
And I was writing NASA all the time. Send me information. Send me information. I've
you
read
like
every
writing,
book in
like
the
physically
library.
writing. I mean,
oh yeah,
in
this
those
was
days.
not physically writing like that with your thumbs.
I even
like,
made the note. Like
no. But to take it seriously, you had to be on a typewriter. I don't.
No, like really nice
write
penmanship.
it,
It's
all
like
that.
yeah.
So you type it, you send it to NASA, and you'd have to make 10 different letters to send it to 10 different people, and they kept sending me the same food pamphlets, food in space. I use the toilet in space.
Congratulations, kid. Here you go.
So anyway, I started writing, asking for more serious information.
Right.
And I couldn't get it. And one day on television during a moon landing, I see the CBS News anchor, and he's holding up these technical manuals.
Yeah.
So I call up the guy down in Houston. It's like the man in charge of everything with the press.
Yep.
And I said, well, I want one too. And he's like, well, that's like Walter Cronkite.
Who are you? Like,
yeah, you're like a kid. Like, you have to be accredited press. These things cost a lot of money to print. You can't just send them to anybody.
Yeah, it's not like an email. It's not like, here's our download.
No PDF.
Yeah. No
you
kidding.
Just download. So he said, like, you need to find a way to be a accredited press.
Right.
Like, maybe you could write some articles for a magazine or write a book or something.
Just to get some credibility.
So I thought about it. I thought, I'm never going to be able to write for a magazine. I'm 13 or 14 years old.
Right.
But I could write a book. That's just me.
I could write a book.
So I wrote a book on unmanned spaceflight.
Right.
And my grandfather had his secretary type the thing up.
What was it called? It was called Inside.
It's called Unmanned Spacecraft, an Inside View.
An inside view.
As if I had
from
an inside
the 13,
view.
14-year-old.
Yeah, but that's what I called it.
Which is pretty funny because that's kind of what this is.
It's true. I've thought about that.
Decades later.
So, and I made up this hypothetical comet mission, and I described how the whole thing would play out, called Frontiersman 1.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Frontiersman 1.
It even had a CubeSat that separated and took selfies of the main.
A CubeSat long before they were CubeSats?
Yeah,
like,
it was called a subsatellite.
The subsatellite.
All right, so I write this thing, my grandfather's secretary types it with carbon paper, so you have 2 copies in the original.
Right.
And I package up the original, and I send it to the guy at NASA. I said, with a letter, I've written a book. And the guy calls me back, and he said, he basically was raising the white flag. He's like, you wrote an entire book? I looked at this thing. He's like, okay, you're press now.
There's your document.
And then a box of technical manuals, and I'm not kidding, it was 3 feet high.
Really?
Showed up. There must have been a dozen different thick documents in there, right? and that was like a drug, you know.
So all that information,
and I just became completely hooked on it, and knew I wanted to be in space exploration.
That's so cool. I was reading the book and I saw that part in the book, and it really sort of struck home for me because I applied for a NASA Social, right? There's people at NASA Social for Insight that's taking off right now, and it's like groups of people who are interested in spaceflight, but maybe they're not they're not media, right? So just I always urge people, I'm like, hey, send in the application, just write the letter, say how passionate you are about NASA Social. You never know, you don't have to have 10,000, 100,000 Twitter followers, maybe you'll get to come and check something out. So just inspiring younger people to sort of stick their foot out there, like get out there and say, hey, I'm going to give this a try, because you never know what it might spark off.
But also, you know, that was, I mean, you were what, 12 years old when that?
13 or
13, 14.
Yeah, a little older
but
for
that's,
NASA
you know,
Social.
Alan was showing a certain personality trait that I think wind his way through the book, because basically when this is the story of a team that was really led by Alan, you know, and it was instigated from the beginning, who were kind of told, no, you're not qualified to do this.
Right, exactly.
And they're like, well, we're going to figure out how to do it. And you know, he didn't accept that he shouldn't do it. He was like, I really want to. I'm going to find a way.
Right.
And that's the story of this whole thing.
And there were a lot of people, you know, I shouldn't get all the
no,
credit,
absolutely,
because,
yeah.
you know, if it would have been one person, this would have never happened.
Absolutely.
It was a big group of people, and they stuck to it, and they stuck together for a long time.
Yep.
No matter what the situation was, no matter how many times we had to start over.
That's even part of it. Like, again, I'm sort of reading through the book, refreshing my memory on how things work, and just obstacles that keep cropping up. I mean, you met an obstacle when you were young, and you sort of showed that you would overcome it and work to it and really go the extra mile. I mean, write a book to get the technical documentation, right? And that sort of was a theme throughout the entire challenge of getting a spacecraft to Pluto. I mean, again, we don't take our magic spacecraft wand and just wave it around and make it appear on Pluto, right? Just getting it physically there is a challenge.
The story David tells,
Yeah.
I don't think has ever been told. And I will say New Horizons is maybe not a record setter, but it's probably either the record setter or a runner-up
Right.
how difficult it was to get it started. Very difficult curve. It took 12 years.
Right.
And then, once we got it, there was this 4-year horse race because there was almost no time left before there was the last Jupiter launch.
The window where you could get the
So
gravity
we had to
assist.
build a spacecraft in record time,
Yep.
get nuclear launch approval, and half the time that any mission ever had.
Right.
And we had to do all that while building it for less than a quarter of the cost of Voyager. And so people, you know, when we won this project,
Yeah.
as principal investigator, I literally had colleagues calling me up saying, you know, you won but you lost, because the challenges are so high, you're going to sink a couple years into this,
Right.
and it's going to get canceled. You're not going to be able to meet the schedule or the cost, and then there's going to be all this egg on your face.
Yeah, like, oh, look
You're
at
gonna wish
you
you'd
tried
never
it
won
and
it.
failed, right?
Exactly.
And
But
there was
pulled
no
it
delaying.
off.
There was no delaying because of the way Jupiter was moving
Yeah,
in its
it's
orbit.
literally a physical, like it launches
Yeah.
this. It's not
You
political,
have
it's not
to,
whatever.
Jupiter has to be in the right place to slingshot it onto Pluto.
3-week-long launch window in
One
January
3-week long
06.
window.
You
Okay.
miss it, we'll see you in 9 years.
And there were all sorts of like scientific reasons about that, like Pluto moving further away from the sun and the difference in the atmosphere as it got cooler, and all that sort of stuff that was going to happen. If you didn't hit that window, you're not going probably, right?
It
No
was
pressure.
challenging.
No pressure.
But obviously, and this involved 2,500 people when we were building the rocket
Yep.
and the nuclear power supply. So this was a big game with a lot of contractors,
Right.
a lot of universities, principally my place, the Southwest Research Institute, Lockheed Martin for the rocket, and then the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins
Right.
building the spacecraft. And people were very dedicated. Nights and weekends were standard, 52 weeks a year, traveling like crazy, you know, and overcoming problems. And there are some real heroes in this story, individuals from NASA and from the project. David brings that out. And there are a couple of villains,
Right.
or at least not helpful people.
People who had other
Let's say
priorities.
obstacles in the form of certain human beings.
It's a human-shaped
Carbon
obstacle.
obstacles.
Human-shaped obstacles.
There you go.
Carbon-based obstacles.
Nice carbon-based obstacles.
But Alan said, you know, there really were some heroes too, including some unlikely heroes. Like there were a couple points where, you know, the mission was canceled. That was it. And then Alan and his crew, his colleagues, were like, how can we rescue this? And then one part of it, at times, it had to marshal public support and show that the public wanted Pluto. And there was this kid Ted Nichols,
Yeah,
a
you're
teenager.
right.
18 years old from Pennsylvania.
Who came out of
Yep.
nowhere, and he was just like passionate about Pluto. He started a Save Pluto website.
Like a website in 2000, I think, like 99, 2000 is when that was.
And this kid literally showed up at NASA headquarters and somehow worked his way
To the very
upstairs
top echelon.
to a meeting with the top leaders of NASA, and they're all like, "Okay, kid, who put you up to this?"
Yeah,
And he's
who's
like,
behind this? Like,
"Nobody put me up to it. I really care about
like,
Pluto. I want a
Who
mission."
paid for you to
who
come
paid
here?
for you to come here?
Right?
No kidding.
Right? And he's like, I mowed lawns. It's gas money.
I mowed lawns.
And they,
No kidding.
I think they probably thought Alan had put him up to it, but he
They
hadn't.
They totally thought that we had done it, and it was because this kid was so boyish looking for 18.
Right.
That he was like the poster child for we have to go to Pluto. This kid wants it, but the kid was super savvy.
Yeah.
So after he leaves this meeting where these NASA adults, right, are like fingers in his chest.
Yeah.
Who put you up to this? Who paid for your trip?
So I imagine
How
like
did you
a
get
light
here?"
in his face.
Yeah.
Like,
He leaves the meeting after telling us just me.
Right.
And he starts calling up the press and telling them the story that they had accused.
Oh.
him, right? And the story went viral in
Yeah.
newspapers. And it was just amazing.
It's like, again, there are all sorts of heroes throughout the story, and I'm gonna spoil everything, right? But there's so many points where one person makes a phone call and the log jam gets cleared up, or
Yeah.
one person
Wait a minute.
does.
They ought to make a movie.
God, you know,
I
that's a
feel
really
like
good
there's
idea.
There's a theme here.
It's like a cliffhanger.
It's like a cliffhanger.
Totally.
Ron Howard ought to make a movie. Oh,
Yeah.
he's made a space movie. Yeah.
He hasn't made a space movie in a while.
That's right.
You
Tell
watching
us more
Ron?
about this.
Hey, Ron.
Or if anybody's watching who knows Ron,
It's a funny thing. So we do streams, and before we sort of got out here, I mentioned we would be doing this live broadcast, and we would be talking with y'all. And quite a few people actually reached out to me and said, "Say hi to you." And they were like,
Oh.
"Hey, I met him in Stockholm or somewhere like that, and,
Wow.
or Netherlands or somewhere like that. You were giving a talk, and we talked to him for a while, and it was really cool." And
Oh,
it was
neat.
like, whoa, okay.
hey,
funky
if you're
city.
watching, folks, nice to see you again.
So it's just sort of like all over the map. It's a testament for how many different people come together with all sorts of different skill sets. A kid that can make a website, or somebody who can design an instrument, or somebody that can design a trajectory.
So by the
whatever.
time you get halfway through the book,
Yeah.
all
It's
the
about where I'm
political battles
in.
are
I'm
over.
in between the pictures.
And somehow the spacecraft got built and tested, and everything came together, and the rocket's ready, and the NASA administrator literally has to make a decision whether to launch.
Right.
And and he makes the decision we're going to launch, and we go to the launch, and we get launched successfully, right? And then you have this long 9.5-year journey, which you think might be boring.
Yeah.
But what we do is we tell the story, under the hood story of how you not only plan a flyby, but all the backup plans,
Right.
and all the training that people go through, and the mission simulations.
Yep.
Right?
Because you don't just sit there.
Because
the
no one
entire
ever
time.
sees that.
Oh, no.
You
No
got to
one ever sees
maintain
that.
the
Yeah.
capability.
I think in a way
inside
that's
story.
one of the most fascinating parts of this book, of the story, because you know there's these moments that are in the public eye. The launch is very visible, and the launch is really exciting, and we describe that. You know, there's a lot of drama and a sort of zoo of publicity,
yeah.
and then it sort of disappears from the public eye, and then years later, when you're approaching Pluto, it becomes a story again. But there's a lot of interesting stuff that is just not
to keep
been made
happening.
visible.
Right.
What the team goes through in that 9 years, the planning is unbelievable, and the technical innovation that these guys had to figure out. How do you make a spacecraft keep working
Right.
all that time? And they
For
did
9
this,
years through
yeah.
deep space on the way to Pluto.
They did this really cool thing that had never been done before, called hibernation.
Right.
Where they literally put the spacecraft to sleep,
sleep.
and wake it up once in a while and do some
Diagnostics.
things. And it both saves the
Course
wear and
correct.
tear. So by the time you get there in 9 years, it's not all worn out
Yep.
from operating continuously, and it's much smarter because the personnel on the ground, while it's sleeping, they can be working on planning what we call the invasion of Pluto.
Yeah.
There's actually a chapter called Battle Plan Pluto.
Battle Plan Pluto, nice. And I think we're pretty short on time here, right? Like, I think we could probably sit here and do this for an hour, right? I really, really appreciate y'all coming out. I gotta say about the book, I don't want, I started reading it, and when I'm done reading it, I'm gonna send it to my mom. And my mom's not technical, right? But it's a story about people that are sort of like fighting all these things and coming up with these things and planning and working together and all these things.
It's a combined nerd fest and adventure story.
Exactly, like the way that it starts out, my mom's gonna love it because it's got all the, they had to do this, and the kid showed up with a website, and then this happened. So
Before
from what
we
I've read
go-
so far,
Can I just bring
Sure.
up? Can I teach you one acronym?
absolutely.
It's TOMAM.
TOMAM,
Yeah.
Okay.
TOMAM.
TOMAM.
they ought to make a movie.
I thought you were going to tell them about Mom. So there's a person in the book whose acronym is Mom.
Yeah, there is.
This woman, Alice Bowman, who's another hero, who helped save the mission at various times, and her acronym is Mission Operations Manager. Mom.
I want Twitch to make. They ought to make a movie go viral.
Yeah.
Viral? I want it to go viral this weekend.
Just this weekend, like right now. I mean, you've said it. I think we have some good clips of it. Last sort of thing, we were also inspired. Like, I've got my shirt on from my Pluto mission shirt. When the flyby happened, we made the shirt before we got into the imagery back. So Pluto's just a little blue planet, and it doesn't really have anything to do with it. And once we started to get the pictures back, like the picture with the big heart on one side, it's literally one of my emotes on Twitch. So you know, you have a little smiley face and stuff.
Yeah.
See. Thank you. So we have
Validation.
like a heart emote whenever we love something or whenever something's really cool. We'll spam hearts in chat. So my heart emote for my entire channel that we use anytime we love something is literally imagery of Pluto.
That's
that
awesome.
came back from the spacecraft that y'all made happen.
That is awesome. Yeah, as we're as they're closing in on Pluto after this 9-year journey, what was just a bright spot on the surface starts to resolve, and its shape starts to be apparent. And it's like, whoa, Pluto's got a heart.
Yeah.
That's one of the awesome, delightful parts of the discovery of Pluto.
And it turns out to be the biggest glacier in the solar system.
Biggest glacier in the solar system.
And it's convecting.
See, look, there we go. There's the Pluto hearts in Twitch chat right now.
There we are.
Like,
awesome.
I'm literally showing them the Pluto hearts in Twitch chat. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. I know y'all are going to get some other things ready for the book talk here. I appreciate the work y'all did on New Horizons and the book. I mean, it's so inspirational for us to see, and it shows us what we don't know and how we should sort of be in wonder of these things. And it doesn't mean like, oh, it's not important, who cares? You go out there and you never know until you get there. And so there are probably some people watching us now that will be involved in future missions.
I hope
maybe
so.
Absolutely.
Pluto lander one day, if that's possible or technically done.
Absolutely.
Maybe
Yeah,
going to Venus or something
there's
like
going to
that.
be some incredible space exploration happening in the 21st century. Alan describes this as sort of the beginning of Star Trek. Well, we're going to keep going, and there's going to be more missions. So if you're watching and you want to get involved, there's going to be work to do exploring space.
So we do have to go. They have to get some other things set up here. Again, we're not going to stop the stream. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about New Horizons and Pluto. They are going to give these actual presentation here in the background on the stage in just about 40 minutes, or 45 minutes, like that. Thank you so much again for joining me. We can talk like this forever. I'm going to see if you guys ever want to come play Kerbal with me. I can get you a Pluto lander, and I can get you a mission to our Venus analog.
I'm selling for an orbiter.
You still was an orbiter. We can do that too. Why not both?
Twist our arms.
Yeah,
it's Kerbal, of course. We can have both.
Thank y'all so much for the time. I really do appreciate it.
Hashtag Toeman.
Chasing
Twitch
New
chat.
Horizons.
Give us just a second. We're going to go to AOS, and we'll be right back. Thank y'all so much. David Grinspoon. Alan, thank y'all so much for the time.
You made a lot of fun.
Good times. Hey, bumper stickers, nice. So chat, we'll be right back. Give me just a second. We're going to switch over here. They have some other presentations and stuff like that. I've got a little bit of stuff about Intrepid and stuff to talk about while we stand by for their actual presentations. I mean, look, I'm a Twitch streamer, right? Like, I'm not an interviewer, and I'm not a host, and I'm not any of these things. I'm just a space nerd. And the fact that I can sit here and be a streamer, and Twitch gives me this opportunity to sort of play video games and talk to audiences, and then all of a sudden we're sitting here with these people. I don't know what to tell you, chat. I have no clue what to tell you. I assume I'm still in the frame. Are we still even live? Like, I don't even know. Thank the Intrepid so much for bringing us out here and giving us access to do this. Thank Alan and David so much for sitting down. I mean, you never know. It's like a live show. Like, who the heck am I to be able to talk to these guys? Like, I don't know. And finally, thanks to y'all for letting us, for sort of believing in the whole thing. And it doesn't matter which stream you watch, whoever your favorite streamer is, when you sit down and you lurk in chat, or you chat in chat, or you just leave it up on the background while you do your work, or whatever it is you do to support your channels on Twitch. I mean, we couldn't be in this sort of charmed existence that we are without people showing up to the stream. So, from the bottom of my Pluto heart, thank you so much for believing in us and letting us do this sort of thing and showing up. when we get sort of access like this. We're going to go to the AOS screen right quick. I'm going to flip the camera around, and we'll talk a little bit more about New Horizons in just a second. Give us about 60 seconds to move the camera, and we will be right back.